So, the American people are being manipulated in a profound way, the likes of which we have not seen before. And it's for a really big reason. A reason that will not only affect us in our lifetime, but will affect our kids and our kids' kids. That's how serious this is.
If that is true, and we take a second look at what is playing out right in front of us with a different lens, then it becomes undeniable. We are seeing it happen in real time, right in front of us, and it is not being hidden at all. We're talking about decisions being made behind the scenes. We're talking about manipulation happening right in front of us, in plain sight.
Yeah, I mean, take Kevin Warsh, for example, the new Fed chair. Everyone, and I mean everyone, said the same thing when he got the job. There is one of Trump's good old boys. He's going to be a puppet. He's going to cut rates the second he sits in that chair. Then what happened? Warsh comes out and says he may hike rates. Wait, did he just really say he's going to hike rates? That single sentence blew the entire narrative out the water. People laid down their pitchforks and everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Hey, looks like this guy's going to be independent after all.
But what if that's actually by design? What if they're 4 steps ahead of you and you're still worried about where your pawn is going to be on the board? Have you ever sat somewhere and watched a kid work his parents? I mean, really put on the charm? He tells them exactly what they want to hear. Better yet, he says things that make sense, things that actually support what the parents already believe. Then, out of nowhere, the script gets flipped and the parents realize they just got played the entire time by their child. But it's too late because little Tommy already has the ice cream in his mouth.
That is exactly what we think is happening with the American people and the economy right now. We've been tracking what's been going on, you and me, Manley, and while we've been looking at all this data out there, we've been noticing something sitting in plain sight. But unless you are focused on it, and I mean hyper-focused, it goes completely under the radar. We're talking about 4-dimensional chess player sitting in a room full of checkers players. And we've been playing on their board this entire time.
Take that World Cup FIFA story that's out there right now for all you soccer players. A sitting United States president made one phone call to the World Soccer League to reverse the call. And they actually reversed it. Political pressure, direct leverage, outcome change, live on television for the entire world to see. But what if that exact same move is happening right now with your mortgage rate? Not on television, in plain sight, but invisible unless you know exactly where to look.
Yeah, that's right. And what we found is going to completely change how you feel about rates and inflation. And once you see it, you simply cannot unsee it. Stay with us, because we're about to make you a 4D chess player.
We talk to first-time buyers every single week, and they all believe the same thing about their rate. They believe it's neutral. They believe it is the math. Inflation moves, the Fed reacts, bond yields shift, and the rate lands wherever it lands. No person is behind it. No pressure moves it. It's just numbers doing what numbers do. That is the story that everyone's been told, and it's the story that keeps people parked on the sidelines waiting for the math to eventually break their way. We believe that story too, until this week gave us a reason to question it. Because that same week as we're recording this, we watched something happen that completely shattered our assumption.
Yeah, I mean, let's look at what just happened like you talked about with the World Cup, right? I mean, Team USA striker Folarin Balogun, he gets a straight red card against Bosnia and Herzegovina. Automatic 1-game ban, no appeal. That rule has held for 60 years of World Cup soccer. Then a phone call happens. President, he calls the head of FIFA and says he doesn't think this is a real foul. 2 days later, FIFA reverses the suspension. But again, he plays against Belgium. And guess what? Belgium is furious. The UEFA calls the reversal unprecedented, incomprehensible, and unjustifiable. A rule that held for 60 years bent in 48 hours because someone with enough leverage asked it to. Political pressure worked in real time on live television in front of the world to see.
So here's the critical question we want you to sit with. If one phone call can undo World Cup ruling in 48 hours, why has another phone call been completely ignored for months? Trump appointed Kevin Warsh as Federal Reserve Chair. specifically because he thought Warsh would cut rates. That was the deal. That was what was expected. Lower rates that make the economy look good, make the incumbent look good, help with midterms and elections. So Trump had been calling publicly and privately asking Warsh to cut rates. And Warsh, he's basically said no. Not just no, but he's also now signaling the opposite direction entirely. The Fed is talking about rate increases, not cuts.
That's right. And that paradox, it's real. Just like you said, one call moved a FIFA ruling in 48 hours. The other call, it hasn't moved the Fed chair at all, despite Trump literally appointing him. So why would one work, but the other wouldn't? It's not about leverage because Trump has way more leverage over Warsh than he has over the head of FIFA. There is a reason Warsh is resisting. There is a reason that the conversation keeps shifting from rate cuts to potential rate increases. And that reason is not what Trump wants to hear. But understanding that reason is everything because it changes how you see your rate, your market, and what actually matters for your next move. So let's be direct about why Warsh is saying no to rate cuts when Trump is asking for them. It's not because Warsh doesn't like Trump, and it's not because Warsh wants to hurt the administration. It's because Warsh has a job to do, and that job is not to make the president look good. The Federal Reserve has what is called a dual mandate, stable price, and maximum employment. That is it. Not election cycles, not political optics, not what the president wants to tweet about. Stable prices and maximum employment. Right now, inflation is sitting at 4.1% by the official measure. The Fed's target is 2%. That means inflation is more than double of where it's supposed to be. And here's the thing about inflation that most people simply do not understand. Once it gets embedded in people's expectations, it becomes incredibly hard to get out. People start expecting prices to go up, so they demand higher wages, which pushes prices up more. That's how inflation sticks around for years.
But here is where the parallel to FIFA gets really uncomfortable. Remember, FIFA changed a 60-year-old rule in 48 hours because of political pressure. Say that again. They changed it in 48 hours because of political pressure. Well, Warsh is doing something very similar with how inflation itself is measured. And almost nobody notices it because it's not live on television. The current way the Fed measures inflation is called Core PCE Index. It's at 4.1% right now. But Warsh has been very vocal about the fact that he thinks the core PCE is what he calls a rough swag, a scientific wild guess. He prefers something called trimmed mean inflation and median inflation. These measures remove the extreme price spikes and the extreme price drops to see what the underlying inflation actually looks like. And here's the thing. Under Warsh's preferred method, inflation right now would not be 4.1%. It would be 2.3 or 2.8%. That's not a small difference. That is a difference between inflation being in crisis and inflation being under control.
Now, how does the Fed actually fight inflation when it's this high? It raises interest rates. Simple as that. When interest rates go up, borrowing becomes more expensive. A car loan, it costs more. Mortgages, they cost more. Credit cards, they're costing more. Everything becomes more expensive to the borrower. So people spend less. Your neighbor, it stops buying that new car. Your coworker puts off that home renovation, and your friend delays buying the house. When people spend less, the demand goes down. And when demand goes down, stores, they don't have to raise prices as much. That is how you break the inflation cycle. One person's spending is another person's income. I say that all the time. If you cut spending, you cut income. That sounds bad, and in the short term it is, but this is the medicine you need when inflation is baked in. You have to make spending painful enough that people stop doing it so much. Otherwise, inflation just gets worse, it becomes the new normal, and we fall off a debt cliff.
The debt cliff. That's where most people miss about rate hikes and how they actually work. This takes time. A lot of time. Rate hikes do not do the work overnight. It's like a ship turning in the ocean. Takes time. When the Fed raises rates in July, the economy doesn't feel it in August. The lag is usually between 6 months and 18 months before the rate hike actually shows up in inflation numbers. That is why the Fed is already acting even though inflation has not come down yet. They're acting now because they know it will take until next year, or maybe into the year after, before the inflation they're fighting actually responds to what they're doing today. So Warsh is not raising rates because the economy looks bad right now. Warsh is raising rates because he knows what is coming if he doesn't. He's acting based on what the data tells him about the future, not based on what Trump wants today.
And here's where Warsh is doing something completely different from the last Fed chair. The previous Fed chair, he would say one thing and do something else. Powell would hint at rate cuts in speeches, but then the data would come in worse and he would not cut. Or he would talk about patience, but then pivot and hike. Markets got whiplashed because they could not trust what the Fed was saying. There was a huge gap between the words and the actions. Warsh is trying to close that gap by simply saying less and letting his actions speak louder. His statement is shorter. He is giving less forward guidance. He is not playing the guessing game with the markets any longer. Instead, he is saying very simply, we will deliver price stability. That is it. Then the Fed actually delivers on that promise by raising rates when inflation is high. When people see the Fed doing what it said it was going to do, they start to trust the Fed again. And when people trust the Fed, the markets stabilize. Uncertainty narrows. That is what Warsh means by credibility. It is not about being popular. It is about doing what you say you're going to do the first time.
But here's the elephant in the room that nobody is talking about. Warsh just created 5 task forces, and one of them specifically is focused on how the Fed measures and calculates inflation. This task force is supposed to deliver recommendations by the end of this year, by December 2026. That's 5 months away. If that task force recommends switching from core PCE to trimmed mean inflation, the Fed could make that change officially and overnight. Inflation would go from 4.1% to 2.3 or 2.8%, not because actual prices stopped going up, not because the economy actually healed, but because they changed the measurement. They changed the rule, just like FIFA changed the rule mid-tournament, and suddenly the political problem, it's solved. Inflation is under control, the president can claim victory, rate cuts become justified, but the underlying reality of how much things cost you at the grocery store, at the pump, at the mortgage counter, that does not change. Only the way it's measured changes.
So the reason why Warsh is not cutting rates right now is because the fundamental conditions of the economy do not support it yet. But by December, if this inflation calculation changes, those conditions might look different on paper, even if they're not actually different in your wallet. The phone call did not work on rates because the answer to the question was actually no. But the rules are being written right now to make sure that by the end of this year, that answer might look different, even if nothing actually changes except for the measurement itself. That is the problem we are sitting on right now.
I asked for a review because I didn't think it was a foul. And, again, I'm good at this stuff. I didn't think it was a foul. I thought it was 2 great athletes that crashed into each other and got entangled. That was not a guy punching somebody in the face or anything that, would be different.
So here is what we need you to understand about the current state of the market right now. 1.9 million homes missing from the market to meet demand. That's nearly 2 million homes. That's not a supply shortage. That's a supply crisis. And the reason is the lock-in effect. 60% of all homeowners in America locked in a mortgage rate below 4% during those pandemic years. Those people are not selling. They're never selling, not at current mortgage rates. So inventory, it's going to stay crushed.
That's right. And let me paint you a picture with real numbers so you can see exactly what waiting costs you. Let's say you're a family looking at a $400,000 home in the mid-coast market right now. The mortgage rate's around 6.59%, which is where we're today. On a $400,000 loan at 6.9%, that puts your monthly payment at about $2,600 per month before taxes and insurance. That is the family sitting on the sidelines saying to themselves, nope, I'm going to wait for rates to drop. Now let's say rates do drop. Let's say that inflation calculation change happens in December and Warsh switches to trimmed mean inflation, and inflation suddenly looks like 2.3% instead of the 4.1% we're currently seeing. And guess what the market does? It reacts immediately.
All right, now on that same $400,000 home, a 6.09% rate drops from your monthly payment to around $2,330. You just saved about $270 per month. Yeah, that sounds great. But here is what you missed while you were waiting. That family that bought in July at 6.59%, they've been paying the mortgage for a full year, 12 months. 12 months of principal payments, and they're building equity.
That's right. And home prices, they didn't drop while they were waiting. Prices stayed stable or maybe even went up slightly. That family that bought in July at 6.59% is now living in a home that is worth more, or at the worst, the same price than what they bought it from. So now they have built almost $5,000 in equity through principal and payments alone. Plus, they captured all the appreciation in that same 12 months.
Now, that waiting family, they did not buy in July. They paid rent for 12 months instead. Let's say their rent was about $2,000 a month in the same market. 12 months of rent is $24,000, and they get nothing back. Not a single dollar of equity, not a single dollar of appreciation, nothing.
That's right. And this waiting family now has to pay more on their purchase price for the same monthly payment, and they are starting out their equity build a full year behind. They saved $270 per month in mortgage payments, but they spent $24,000 in rent and paid $8,000 more for the home. That is a $32,000 cost to save $270 per month. That math does not work. It never works.
That waiting family does not get to do a do-over. They paid full price for that home that appreciated while they waited, and now they're starting from behind. This is why we say understanding the curve changes everything. The curve was laid out in segment 2. Rate cuts are coming, not because the economy is actually getting better. They're coming because the measurement is going to change. And the moment the market senses that measurement is about to change, it's going to move. Inventory will flood from sellers who have been waiting. Demand will explode from buyers who have finally had enough. Prices will spike because supply is crushed and demand is pent up.
Virtually all presidents I've either known or studied, presidents tend to be for cutting rates. I think the difference is President Trump expresses it quite publicly without surrogates or subterfuge, but presidents want lower rates. But Fed independence is up to the Fed.
All right, let's ground this in where the market actually sits right now, because history is context, but today's numbers are what matters for your next move.
Yeah, let's jump into it. A 30-year mortgage rate is sitting at 6.59% as of today. The 10-year Treasury yield is about 4.47%. The coupon on the UMBS 5.0 for July is sitting at 98.30, up 20 basis points of the day. Those three numbers tell you everything you need to know about where we are. Rates are holding steady, Treasury yields are stable, and the bond market is pricing in exactly what we just walked through.
The market knows what's coming. The question is whether you do.
Did Kevin Warsh commit to you that he will push to cut interest rates if he is confirmed?
No, but we talk about it, and I've been following him, and I don't want to ask him that question. I think it's inappropriate, probably would be allowed, but I want to keep it nice and pure. But he certainly wants to cut rates. I've been watching him for a long time.
So here's the answer to the question we opened with. One phone call changed the World Cup match in 48 hours because FIFA had the authority to reverse it and the political pressure to do so. That same phone call did not change mortgage rates because the Federal Reserve does not have the authority to cut rates when inflation is at 4.1%. But Warsh, he's not ignoring that pressure. He's building the conditions so that by December, when the inflation calculation changes and inflation magically looks like 2.3% instead of 4.1%, the rate cuts will not be a political favor. They will be a mathematical necessity. That's what the real game being played is right now. And understanding that game changes everything about what you should do next.
So here's what we need to do this week. You need to call your lender. You need to get pre-approved, and not because you have to buy tomorrow, but because understanding your actual power changes everything. You might qualify for more than you think. You might qualify with less down payment, and you might qualify with income documentation that's non-traditional. But most importantly, you will know exactly what happens to your payment if rates do drop 0.5% in December, because that drop is coming. The only question is whether you are on the right side of it or you're on the wrong side of it. We are Anthony and Manley. This is the Mortgage 101 podcast. And if this hit different, like it, subscribe, and share it with the one person sitting on the sidelines, waiting for permission to buy a home. Tell them the curve has been explained. The move is now. We'll see you next week.
Girl from the heart of Wisconsin to the waves of Hawaii. Manley and Anthony keep it real, not salesy. Breaking down rates and the truth you need to know with a little soul and a little homegrown flow. It's the Mortgage 101 podcast where real talk meets home at last. Manly's got that Midwest soul. Anthony brings that island roll when the market swings and you don't know